Well, my name is Carolyn and I'm a compulsive eater and I'm abstinent today on the gray sheet. I weigh and measure 3 meals a day from the gray sheet. I commit them to my sponsor. I eat my meals no matter what. I do not eat in between my meals no matter what. And abstinence is the most important thing in my life. And it has given me a much richer and fuller life, really a life beyond my wildest dreams. Lately, I've been thinking of trying to reconnect with a woman that I was close friends with in high school. And I've thought in my mind, the letter I would write to her about catching her up on the last 45 years of my life since I saw her, or 47 since we were in high school, but I had seen her after high school. I'm 65, just to help you do the math there. And really, the whole letter would be like a before and after of like, I was miserable, I was this, I was that. And then I discovered my 12-step program. And since then, my life has been, not a bed of roses. I've had a lot of challenges and difficulties, but I feel able to handle them. I mean, I love the promises, the AA promises. I just feel like I am living them in my life, like situations which I know how to handle situations which used to baffle me. I mean, it's not always fun and it's not always pleasant and, there are still hard things, but I just feel like Gray Sheet gave me this incredible foundation. It's less, I think of it as this sort of golden thread running through the tapestry of my life, to be a little corny there, that just makes everything fall into place. So I was always a compulsive eater from my earliest memories. My earliest memory is when I was 3 years old, I had my tonsils out and they told me that I'd be able to eat all I wanted of the frozen carbohydrate. And so I was very excited about it. And then when I woke up in the hospital, I was too sick and didn't want it. And when I got home, they said, well, we just meant you could eat as much as you wanted in the hospital. Now you can't have it. And I was furious, furious. And I spent the rest of my life making up for that horrible injustice that was perpetrated upon me. And I always was like sort of sneaking around and trying to get sweet things. And they weren't very, and my mom is a compulsive eater too and has her own issues, actually my whole family. And so we didn't have overtly sweet things, but because she was like a 50s kind of housewife, everything in the house had white crack in it. Even the stuff that you put in the white stuff you put in coffee was not mixed, didn't come from a cow. It came from white crack, and everything, the sauce you'd put on a salad or, just everything. And to this day, when I go to her house, I know I can't, there's like nothing there I can touch in her refrigerator. It's been like that the whole time. Everything, the meat, everything. It's unbelievable how it's just like imbued with that stuff. Um, so I grew up always craving it and wanting it. And yet we were always, on a diet and we were always watching it. And then there'd be, back in Elia times, for Christmas and birthdays and some other holidays and my grandmother's house. And I'd look forward to them. And I would, from Halloween and Easter, I'd hoard the black crack stuff I got. And, it was pathetic as I think about it. I mean, one of my brother, one year, had an issue. One year, he was already like 13 or 14. They didn't give him his Easter basket of crack stuff. And he burst into tears. He's a 13 or 14-year-old boy and like had an tantrum. I want it. I want it. And they're like, well, it's not good for you. You shouldn't have it. And that was my family. And my brother, God, he's 400 pounds, and I've tried so hard to get him into Gray Sheet. And, that would be me if, so I stumbled around for years. In my early 20s, I went on my first diet with a friend and, it was successful because, the first time you diet, your body adjusts to it. And it was a relatively normal diet. It was probably similar to Weight Watchers. I didn't literally measure my food, but I did some kind of portion control. I did not have white crack, but I had brown crack because always it was the fashion that the brown crack was healthy because it was whole grain and it was good for you. And I remember all that time ago noticing and saying, gosh, that brown stuff, even though it's healthy, I find myself craving it and wanting it when I have it, like the whole, whatever stuff. And so I lost weight that time and I got, a lot of strokes and I got married during that 5 minutes. It was thin. And that was the beginning of a secondary addiction, the addiction to dieting. And so then as the years went by, every year, I'd put on some weight and then I'd go on a new diet. And and the diets had to get more and more extreme as time went by and I put on more and more weight and my metabolism slowed down. I also had a baby in there and I had, life went on. I wasn't literally in I was never like living on the street or, I didn't, I had a lot of difficulties, which were, as I see now, related both to my compulsive eating and to my attitude, my lack of, sort of a moral rudder, a lack of sort of the principles and the values that the 12 steps give us. So when my son was about 5 or 6, so I was in my early 30s, I went on, by then it had gotten harder and harder to lose the weight. And that was the year Oprah Winfrey discovered OptiFast. So I discovered OptiFast, and I got my insurance to pay for it. It was this thing where you mixed a powder with water, and that's all you had. No actual food. You just drank this liquid, and it actually was crack. That's what was in the powder, but you drank it 3 or 4 times a day, and it was maybe 600 calories a day. And of course, you lost weight. I mean, anybody would lose weight on a insane starvation diet. So I lost weight, and that time I kept it off for like 1 minute. And then after that, I was never able to lose weight again. I'd still go on my pathetic diet every year, and it just wouldn't work because, it just wouldn't. So in the year 2000, a friend of mine from the East Coast reached out, and she said, I've been going to Overeaters Anonymous, and I think it would really help you. And I said, well, I've gone sometimes, but I never felt connected to anybody. And at the regular OA meetings, I would always run into like very heavy women who would say, oh, I had a slip, but I forgive myself, so I have serenity. And I knew myself that, I didn't care about serenity, or any mental, I didn't see I had a issue. I just wanted to have a normal sized body. So I didn't want to be a like fat woman forgiving myself. I just wanted to be a thin woman and eat all I wanted to at the same time. By that time, I was about 225 pounds. And I have a picture here, which I'm showing old school. This is actually taken in Scotland. I rarely had pictures taken of myself because I was so ashamed of how I looked. But since I was on a trip, I have this picture taken. I can't remember if it was like a famous place that anybody there would know. So, so my friend on the East Coast said, well, I'll sponsor you. And what we did was a very loose arrangement, nothing like a Grey Sheet sponsor. And what it was once a week, I would call her and commit that I would not have any white crack that week. That was my only commitment, but I found out that I did it, because I was committing it to her. I felt like I shouldn't be lying to her. And in fact, when I went on that trip to Europe, I said, I'm not going to commit because I want to eat all the stuff. So I did go on the trip and I ate all the stuff. And then when I came back, I went back to committing that I wouldn't have white crack. So I was still having brown crack. I was still eating huge quantities, but I wasn't having the overt sweet crack. And then she kept encouraging me to find my own meeting. And at the end of the year 2000, I just looked on the schedule for Overeaters Anonymous, and there was one, the most convenient time and place happened to be this meeting called Without Exception in El Cerrito, which is the town I live in now. And I asked her what it was, and she said, I don't know. And I went to it, and it turned out to be a Grey Sheet meeting. In those days, Grey Sheet meetings were listed on the regular OA schedule. And there were just a couple of other people there, 2 old timers and 1 newcomer. But the old timers, one of them had like 10 years abstinence. She's still abstinent, and she's in my home meeting. So now she has 34 years abstinent. God love her. And the other woman, who was the woman who shared, had a few years of abstinence, but she shared that she had lost like 250 pounds, more than I weigh, as much as 2 people's bodies. And, I obviously was a big, big girl at 225. She had lost my entire body from her body, and she had the pictures to prove it. And I was astounded. And then after the meeting, the 2 old timers each turned to us and said, there was me and another newcomer, I'll sponsor you, I'll sponsor you. And that was really, really helpful that somebody just proactively said to me, I will be your sponsor. Because when I went to the regular OA, I was always so scared and timid to ask somebody to be my sponsor. It seemed so intimate, like asking them to have sex with me or something. So then she showed me the Grey Sheet, and I was like, oh, this is ridiculous. Who would do this? I am the world's greatest expert on dieting, and I know that nobody could eat like this, live like this, blah, blah, blah. But I started it, and I had a gift right away, which was it worked for me very well at a physical level, because in all my years and years and years of dieting, it was actually the first diet I had been on that had no brown crack, had more protein, and had more fat, because the style and of my generation was always, this. So it worked really well. And that was a wonderful gift, because I had just been thinking, oh, I'll just do it to kickstart my real diet. And then I kept going to the meetings, and there were other people there with another one with long-term abstinence and others with sort of medium-term abstinence. And I saw how seriously they took it, and we went out to eat together, and I began to take it more seriously. But in my first month, So I made a bunch of technical mistakes the first week, and then my first real abstinence day, that kept for a while was 1101, which is a wonderful date. But I blew that because I decided to take my will back and do an independent way of weighing and measuring something that to me felt more efficient. So I
Five
did that.
minutes, five
Thank you.
left.
I did that a couple of times. I felt so much, and the serenity I had started to get went away, and I felt so much guilt and shame. And I told my sponsor, and we looked at my book and reset it to my abstinence day to January 25th, the last when I had stopped doing it. So now I'm going to fast forward on no matter what. So my first big no, so that was a no matter what, and I'm really glad I had that experience in early abstinence of seeing how the shame and the self-loathing came back so quickly as soon as I took my own will back and decided that I know better than everybody else because I'm so smart. A couple of months later, I had a root canal issue, but I was in tremendous pain and I could barely eat for a couple of days so I could get to the dentist. And even though we had a small community, they helped me a lot. Like I called people before and after all my meals, and sometimes I couldn't finish those meals, and they had me put my salad in a blender, and they just walked me through it. And then I had this other gift that the weight came off very quickly. I lost 10 pounds a month that year, and I got back down to a normal weight, in no time. Um, then, and now I'm going to go really fast forward. In the year 2010, so 9 years later, my dad got sick with pancreatic cancer, which is a terminal illness. And I was able to go back and live with him and my mom and take care of him so he could fulfill his wish to die at home. And that felt like a real living amends. And I never would have been in shape to do that if it weren't for Gray Sheet. And it was hard. I had to coordinate my meals. I only ate when one of the home health aides or the nurses were there because he had so many needs. I didn't want to risk having to like drop my meal and go help him for half an hour and then have the time, but I was so grateful I was able to do that. And then right as the day before he died, I discovered I had been getting tests that I had stage 3 cancer, breast cancer, and I embarked on a year of treatment, and which was several surgeries and chemotherapy, pretty heavy duty chemotherapy and radiation in sequence, not all at the same time. And it was difficult treatment, but I got through it abstinently. I felt that was the most important thing to me. I got I could say some tips. I got a second backup sponsor because my sponsor was on the East Coast. So I got myself a West Coast sponsor for evening issues because my sponsor went to bed early. She and I met with an oncology nutritionist, and we showed her the Gray Sheet, and the nutritionist said, well, that's a wonderful cancer fighting plan. You'll never be able to eat all of that, but eat as much as you can. But I actually was able to eat almost my entire Gray Sheet most of the time. I think sometimes the days after chemo, I would have to commit, a Gray Sheet sick meal that was more small, but in general, and I think Gray Sheet helped me through it. And then, I traveled a lot, and I was going to show you guys a picture of Gray Sheet in Ethiopia. I got my stepdaughter abstinent, and she lived in Ethiopia, and I went to visit her, and she had gotten a Gray Sheet group going. They're no longer going, but that was cool. But I weighed and measured. Africa's a very difficult place, like just the guilt and shame you feel of seeing people starving on the street, and then why should I care enough about myself to like weigh and measure my food when these poor little children are starving in front of me? But I did, and I got sick, really sick. Just so that was, but those are big no matter what's that in my life. And Gray Sheet, actually, the no matter what's that have been, those are all big things, and I like psyched myself up for them, and I was ready for them. The bigger thing, or not the big, it's the small things that end up being more likely to trip you up. The time I'm alone in my kitchen, I'm hungry, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, and I'm, measuring my food, and I do what I know I shouldn't do. I measure an 8-ounce protein on the same dish as a 4-ounce protein, and the scale goes off. And so you just have to you can't salvage that. You have to junk the whole thing and start over. Or thank you, 1 minute, or just, it's little things like that's where I feel like my integrity and my commitment gets the most challenge. I'm like, F it, nobody would know, nobody, that horrible little voice in my head tells me, but I do it, I do what I have to do. I throw it out, or I make the phone call, or I do what I have to do because my abstinence is worth everything to me, and it really has given me a life beyond my wildest dreams. Thank you for letting me share.